Hello, everybody. I just want to say thank you for joining our second ever Black Friday webinar series. So, our Black Friday webinar series is a series discussing the discounts Black people have been forced to take due to flawed policy. The series will explore the disparate treatment and impact of public policy in the United States, both historically and to date, on racial outcomes in areas such as housing, education, healthcare, gender identity, criminal justice, and wealth. Centuries of federal, state, and local politics have cemented systematic racism into our institutions, our culture, and individuals' explicit and implicit biases. Through a series of lectures, articles, videos, and other educational material, we will demonstrate how the intersection of policy and practice can be used to address chronic issues that exist in Black communities as a result of flawed or simply absent policies and practices. As a policy school here at the University of Maryland, we hope that webinars will educate and inspire conversations in an effort to promote accountability and seek remedy for intricacies and policies that have disproportionately affected Black people in the country. This series is co-hosted by Executive Development and the Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging Task Force. So today we have Fox News contributor and veteran political strategist Donna Brazile, who was the former interim chair of the Democratic National Committee and became the first African American woman to serve as the manager of a major party presidential campaign, running the campaign for former Vice President Al Gore. She is the author of the 2004 best-selling memoir, Cooking with Grease, Stirring the Pots in American Politics, and 2017 New York Times bestseller, Hacks, the Inside Story of the Break-ins and Breakdowns that put Donald Trump in the White House. He's, he is a co-author of For Colored Girls Who Have Considered Politics, which won the 2019 NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Literary Works on Nonfiction. Brazil has lectured over 225 colleges and universities across the country. In 2013, Ms. Brazile was appointed by President Obama to serve on the J. William Fulbright Foreign Scholarship Board. She is also the proud recipient of more than 10 honorary doctorate degrees from major colleges and universities, including her alma mater, Louisiana State University. In October 2017, Ms. Brazile was the recipient of the W.E.B. Du Bois Medal, Harvard's highest honor in African American studies. Brazile also served as an adjunct professor at Georgetown University since 2002 and spent the fall of 2017 serving as Joan Schorstein Fellow in Media, Politics, and Public Policy at the Harvard Kennedy School. She is currently the Gwendolyn S. Colbert I. King Endowed Chair in Public Policy at Howard University. So, Ms. Brazile, you can take the rest.
Thank you so much for your very generous and kind introduction. It's a great honor to be a part of this Black Friday seminar. As we all gather today, many of us are mourning the loss of a legendary actress and an iconic figure in American life. Cicely Tyson, as you all know, departed us last evening to be one of the angels along with so many of our ancestors. I knew Cicely personally as someone who always answered our call, whether we were organizing rallies or participating in protest events. Cicely was always there to not only give us her voice, but her support. We will miss this iconic figure. She was a woman of grace. She was a woman of extraordinary talent. She leaves behind a strong legacy, including establishing a school in New Jersey, the Cicely Tyson School for the Performing Arts. So as we gather today, my heart goes out to her many friends, her family, and of course, all of her fans across the country. On a personal note, I once asked Cicely if she would teach me how to be an actress, and she told me to stick to politics. So here I am, sticking to what I have done for the last 5 decades of my life, working in the vineyards of justice to try to expand our electorate to ensure that no American, no eligible citizen is ever prevented from exercising his or her right to vote. So let's get started. We have a new administration. We know that President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, they have hit the ground running. Of course, their focus over the last 7 days has been on ensuring that we get this virus under control. They inherited so many challenges from the coronavirus crisis to the economy, which is stalled, perhaps the worst economy since the Great Recession of 2007, 2008. The climate crisis, which has devastated not just so many communities across the country, but of course, a crisis that is an existential threat to our planet. And finally, racial justice, systemic racism. And this past week, we heard the president outline his agenda, his plan to try to address these important issues and crisis. But as we all know, executive orders can be signed one day, 1 year, and overturn the next year or the next administration. So we have a lot of work to do in figuring out the path forward. But as we prepare to celebrate and commemorate Black History Month 2021, let us remind ourselves that this is a history that we've all made. And now more than ever, we must all figure out how we can help to advance the cause of justice and equality for all. Our fight is not done. And I hope throughout this conversation that we could talk about the many battles that lie ahead, as well as the opportunities that we can all achieve once we are able to get this entire country back on the right foot. So with that, I turn over the balance of my time and let's have this conversation. Thank you so much for allowing me to participate. And I guess on one personal note, as a Capitol Hill staffer back in the 1990s, I had an opportunity to come to the University of Maryland College Park at the Center of Leadership, working with former Professor Ron Walters. So I just wanted everyone to know how excited I am to be back with all of you. What a great experience I had at the University of Maryland College Park. And throughout the 7 years I spent on campus, I got to meet so many remarkable students, some who are now elected officials. But it was a great experience as a part-time adjunct professor. I'm now at Georgetown. I'm in my 19th year and my 3rd year at Howard University. So thank you all and all of the remarkable students, professors, and administrators, because I really appreciated that opportunity to serve. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Brazile. Professor Mussington, take it away.
Right, thank you, Aisha, and thank you, Dr. Brazile. I should call you doctor. There are very many honorary doctorates in reading your background. I was sort of humbled and tremendously impressed, so apologies if I sort of fanboy this a little bit when I begin.
Thank you.
Really rare that we have the pleasure of hosting someone with your varied experience over the many decades that you've made fundamental contributions to Democratic Party and US politics. I'd like to sort of take advantage of that experience that you have, sort of see if you can help us frame the challenges that we confront going forward in the context of the challenges we've dealt with for the last 4 years and maybe previously. So my questions are sort of going to go from the current context to the future context and then back to the current context again. So in spite of many challenges to 2020, President Biden was able to cement his victory along with Kamala Harris as our president and vice president respectively. Your experience in 2016, and I should say I'm influenced by recently reading your excellent book, Hacks, which I actually think is the best summary from an insider of what it was like to live through that unprecedented experience with Russia and the campaign's domestic vagaries, one way or another. So that's sort of my first question, which is, in the context of 2020 sort of working out as Democratic voters preferred, how well do you think we're doing in 2020 versus 2016 relative to all the attacks on Black voter participation? There was a big concern with messaging, disinformation, and voter suppression aimed at Black communities, which 2020, to some people's lights, invalidated because Black turnout set records. So what do you think? How well have we done?
Well, first of all, thank you for the great question. 2016 was an extraordinary political year. In addition to the hacking of the Democratic National Committee by a foreign military intelligence unit, many Americans are not aware that the United States came under attack from the Russian military unit. And when I went over to the headquarters of the FBI, the first ever trip to the FBI headquarters, I was somewhat in shock, disbelief at just how common it was to see foreign governments interfere, not just with political institutions, but academic institutions and much, much more. But the penetration of our digital space, our technology caused a great deal of damage, not only in communicating our message to our voters, but we had to rebuild the entire infrastructure of the Democratic National Committee, from our fundraising base to making sure that our marketing materials, our communication, everything was back up to speed. And remember, while we are one of two major political parties in this country, President Barack Obama was then as president, and not only as president, but also as a nominee of the Democratic Party, he came under attack. And so facilitating an election within that space was very difficult. And I want to say to not just those federal officials, but also to the Clinton campaign, how well they enable us to handle the crisis and to get through the crisis. Now, we know based on not just the evidence that we witnessed within the Democratic Party, but the evidence that has come forth in the intervening years, that the Russians, their focus was to help elect Donald Trump, to weaken Hillary Clinton, to undermine confidence in our democracy, to attack our electoral infrastructure, and to basically pollute the internet with disinformation aimed and targeted toward young voters, millennials, and people of color, especially Black voters in key strategic battleground states. Fighting this type of disinformation was difficult because, as you know, Professor, that once disinformation is put out in the large marketplace of ideas, trying to get it back into the bottle or to even combat it with truth and facts, it strategically was impossible. It was rampant on social media. We know that for less than 8,000 rubles, they were able to buy digital ads on social media aimed directly at Black voters, it's Black male voters in particular, utilizing such salacious lies in terms of what Secretary Clinton, then candidate Clinton, would do in terms of the Black community. So this was a proven attack that not only diluted our ability to get out our message, but if you look at turnout in 2016 compared to turnout in 2020, there was a precipitous drop in 2016 over 2008 and 2012, especially in those battleground states. And what you saw in 2020, this historic year, where we had record turnout across the country, you saw an even larger number of Blacks and millennials and Hispanics turning out during the electoral cycle. So this is still an ongoing issue, problem. I think President Biden the other day made it clear in his conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin that the United States will not tolerate this. We have to build back our cyber defenses. Every American out there that is currently on the internet needs to protect him or herself. And we should no longer use 1234 as a password, or even password lowercase as our password. We have to have strong two-step verification processes, and we have to be more cognizant of how this type of disinformation can not just undermine our democracy, but essentially what's happening now, it turns Americans against their own government and their own institutions. So I wanted to write about it because I was alarmed that the American people would forget, that the government would not follow through in protecting our digital infrastructure, and that cybersecurity would somehow or another go back to being one of those topics that we talk about only in academia. But this is a conversation we should have throughout society as more and more attacks are being identified each and every day. And these are attacks that can not just weaken our democracy, but destroy our country, our financial institutions, and much, much more.
Thanks for that very comprehensive answer. Just I have to ask that. So in 2020, I assume you think we're much smarter than we were in 2016 because we outperformed in terms of turnout and burning through the disinformation, I suppose, that was still there, sometimes from domestic sources, not foreign?
Oh, domestic sources are the worst because it's deliberate. It's deliberate. I mean, look what happened just in the aftermath of the 2020 presidential election. The lie that went all over the country, that the election was stolen, that it was rigged. It was the safest election we've had in decades. I mean, there were more, I think, steps to ensure that we did not get the type of foreign attacks that we saw in 2016. But most importantly, states and localities have really built up their digital infrastructure, their cybersecurity. So as you know, all of our elections are decentralized. They're not, I mean, there's no such thing as a national election board run out of Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. Each and every state, in addition to Secretary of State, they have election administrators all the way down to the municipal level. So yes, we were better prepared in 2020 than 2016, but this level of disinformation is something that we should all be aware of. It is still the lie that continues to be told. And that lie, as you well know, Professor, led to tens of thousands of Americans stumping, coming down to Washington, D.C., crawling up the steps of the Capitol, I don't know any other way of saying it, and trying to infringe upon Congress doing their constitutional duty to certify the election results. So disinformation is still a top priority that we need to get our arms around, and we need social media companies and others to help us with the rampant flow of lies that are being told, and conspiracy theories. There's so many conspiracy theories that I can spend the rest of the afternoon telling you all of the misinformation out there. But this is part of the 21st century and something that we should all figure out how to work together to get this under control.
So just to draw back a little bit, in your 2017 book, you contrasted, I think, digital database campaigning versus more grassroots organization that was more people-centered, as your own career and experience document. Could you sort of comment on how the Democratic Party is doing that in terms of, or how well it's doing in terms of outreach to Black voters and Black communities? Recent success in Georgia suggests that that's going well.
Georgia was made possible by the work and the commitment and dedication of Stacey Abrams and all of those people and organizations that she recruited and empowered. Georgia should be put in its own separate box, because what Stacey Abrams did and the playbook that she used should be utilized not just in Georgia, but my beloved home state of Louisiana, in Texas, in North Carolina. There are more states out there where targeting low propensity voters, targeting young voters who may not be inspired by our democracy and understand the political process, and targeting people who have never participated. I want to say something that will probably shock you, but Donald Trump understood what to do in 2016. He was not elected simply by attacking the Republican establishment. He brought new people to the table. He registered new people. Those rallies were not just entertaining events, they were organizing events. And Donald Trump taught us, and I think I should say this, the former president, he taught us that you got to engage people where they are. You have to go to them. You got to open up the process. And what he did was he opened up the Republican Party to voters that had not participated in American politics. So you might disagree with his his formulation of the case and how he conducted himself in office. But what he did was he gave us a roadmap. Likewise, what Stacey did was give us a roadmap to how to build back stronger, not just the Democratic Party, but grassroots politics. When I started making Zoom calls, because that's what we did in the midst of this pandemic, down into Bell County, down into Randolph County, down into Butler County, all these small counties across Georgia, Stacey targeted not just the metropolitan areas of Metro Atlanta and Fulton County and Cobb County, or Chatham County, which is Savannah. She was targeting these small rural counties where she understood that they were not just Black voters, Latino voters, Asian Pacific Islanders, Native American voters. Stacey had a targeted approach to reaching these voters where they live, where they worked, where they played, or where they prayed. And she, I call it COVID conscious organizing. And she wasn't alone. I mean, Black Voter Matters Fund. There were so many people who were knocking on doors in the midst of this pandemic. That's how you win. You have to connect with people. What I saw when I inherited the chairperson role was a top-down campaign. And I'm like, you cannot win top-down. That's me calling you from Washington, D.C. And saying, hey, I need you to, put this bumper sticker on your car, but I'm not sending you a bumper sticker. Or I need you to put this placard in front of your house, but I'm not sending you a placard. All I'm saying is that when you can reach people where they are and not tell them to come to you, you can detect the difference in terms of turnout. The Democrats won in the vote by mail and the early voting. The Republicans made up ground on election day because I believe the Trump campaign had a better infrastructure of reaching people on election day. We reach people 2 weeks out, 1 week out, a few days out. They reach people on election day, in the period of time where those votes would be counted by nightfall, while our voters, we had to wait a couple of days because they had put their material in the mail or the drop box. So I think there are lessons to be learned in Georgia, lessons going forward to build a bigger, more durable Democratic coalition, and also to compete in states where Democrats have not competed. And that includes my beloved South, from everything from Virginia all the way to Texas, but also in some of the Midwestern and Western states in those rural areas where we just simply have given up on people, and that is not the way to win in the future.
Just to build on that, one other sort of attribute of our current election process is the centrality of Black women's leadership to the victories that were gained. Could you comment on your own background and on, obviously, Stacey Abrams' inestimable contributions and others to the roadmap you just laid out? I assume that is the pattern that could be reproduced elsewhere.
I often tell people that we were one of the last group of Americans to receive the franchise. I mean, when women received the right to vote in 1920, and although women marched down Georgia Avenue to join the protests in 1912, 1913 upon the election of Woodrow Wilson, we still did not get the right to vote, Black women. We waited until 1965, and thanks to the heroic efforts of so many others, including Fannie Lou Hamer, September Clark, Diane Nash. I mean, the list of Coretta Scott King, the list of Black women, Ella Baker, that had a hand in ensuring that Black women would one day be able to exercise this franchise. What I believe strongly in my bones is that Black women are not just the backbone of the Democratic Party, we're the backbone of our democracy. We preserved our democracy. Yes, we preserved our democracy. If you look at the turnout, whether in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, those three states that provided Donald Trump with the victory in 2016 by less than 80,000 votes, take a look at it today and see the tremendous turnout of Black women. And it wasn't just a turnout that was historic, it was their voter preference for Joe Biden. Both exit polls, and we'll get more data as all of this is compiled by the states themselves. Exit polls demonstrate that over 90% of Black women voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. So the leadership is there. The leadership in not just exercising, getting Black women to register. 75% of Black women are registered to vote. I'm looking for that last 25%. But the leadership that we have provided, not just to our institutions, but also on the ground. It's important to understand that Black women have demanded a seat at the table, not to the exclusion of anyone else. We've never said to anyone in the room who's already in the room, whether you're a man or a woman of another identity or background, we've all Black women have said over the last few decades is scoot over and make room for others. We want to serve, we want to lead, and we want to help make a difference in the United States of America. So I am proud of my sisters. I am proud of their leadership. I'm proud not just of Stacey Abrams, who is, just an incredible figure in American politics. And I hope that she will put her hat back in the ring and run for governor next year in the state of Georgia, because I intend to help Stacey Abrams and I intend to help other Black women run for office. This year in this election cycle, we have a Black woman who will be running for governor of Virginia, Jennifer Carroll, and we have a Black woman who will be running for re-election as lieutenant governor of the state of New Jersey. So we're going to continue to press our case, not because we believe that we're special, but we know that we will save and preserve our democracy for all people. And I'm proud of the leadership of Black women. I can't tell you how proud I am.
Yeah, that comes across in your comments, Dr. Brazile. Just a question about institutional Democratic Party now, given what I think is the centrality of Black women to executing, as in getting votes cast. Do you think that the institutional party is fully appreciative of the centrality of Black women as the sort of hardcore base of the Democratic movement?
Well, I only have one answer: Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris. I mean, we pressed for that. When Joe Biden made the announcement on March 15, 2020, that he would put a woman on a ticket, within a week, we wrote a letter saying, we want a Black woman. Joe Biden called us. We had several phone calls, Zoom calls with Joe Biden. He listened to us. Lisa Rochester was on the Vice President Selection Committee. And I am so proud that the then Vice President, now President, listen, we said, if you put a Black woman on a ticket, and in the beginning, we didn't have a name. We just said, there's so many qualified Black women. Interview all of them, okay? Interview all of them. Interview Stacey, interview Keisha, interview Marsha Fudge, interview all of them, Karen Bass, and of course, Kamala Harris. And we said, and when you come back to us, we'll tell you why you will be impressed with not only their background, their strength, their character, how wise and smart they are. But we said, if you want to expand the map, put a Black woman on a ticket. If you want to, grow the arithmetic or the math, put a Black woman. If you want to have a message of healing or bringing the country together, put a Black woman. So I think in all three areas that we said a Black woman would add to the ticket, we were successful. And you can imagine when I got that call on August 11th, that Kamala was chosen. I was excited not only because she is superbly qualified. I was so proud that I called the president of Howard University, Dr. Rain Frederick, and I said, ain't you, ain't you, I mean, to have a Black woman, a proud graduate of a HBCU, a historical Black college and university in the 21st century, what a message. And yes, what a moment for those Black women who I mentioned marched down to join that march, never being able to see this day. She was a living embodiment. She is the living embodiment of everything we fought for, everything that Fannie Lou and Rosa Parks set down so that we could just have a seat of our choice when we got on a bus. So I'm very proud. I'm very happy. I just wish Mrs. King, Coretta Scott King, I wish she had lived to see this day. Dorothy Height, Willie Barrow, C. Dolores Tucker. You know, there's so many Black women who made this day possible. And when Kamala Harris said on that beautiful day on November 7th that she was standing on those shoulders, those sterling shoulders, she was standing tall. So, and I was on the platform last week. I wasn't sitting in the bleachers. I wasn't down on the ground at the foot of the Capitol. I was on the platform. And I could count the number of Black women on that platform. I was there and I witnessed it. But being there, I was thinking about my mom and my grandmother and everyone who just wanted to have that opportunity to cast their ballots for someone that looked like them. And here I am. Not only did I cast my ballot, but I opened up my mouth and I was not afraid. And I said it, and it was quoted in the New York Times. I said, if Joe Biden wants to win, he needs to put a Black woman. And I'm the former chair twice, former officer for 8 years. And I also said that Black women would be disappointed if he looked past us and did not choose one of us. So I am indeed grateful to Joe Biden, who I've known for over 35 years. I knew he was a man of his word, a decent, honorable man, and I'm so proud to call him my president. Indeed, all 45 presidents prior to Joe Biden were my presidents, of course, but this one is personal. This one is special because in knowing Joe Biden over the last 30 plus years, I mean, Biden has always been open to and accessible to those of us who believe in justice and equality for all. So I think America has a great president in Joe Biden and a vice president that you have just gotten to know, but you ain't seen nothing yet. Kamala Harris is amazing. She's phenomenal. You about this. She is smart, wicked smart. She's in the room. She's in all of the conversations. She is pushing. She understands the strategic and importance of having people of all backgrounds and diversity in the room. And she understands these issues. So I'm very proud to call her my friend as well.
Thank you for that. I'm not sure how to follow that answer. I would just say that my daughter, 14, half Indian, half African-American, he also shares your pride in Kamala Harris's breakthrough achievement.
Thank you.
One of the questions, I think maybe Tony and some of our participants have questions, and I should give them the opportunity. So Aisha or Tony, let's open it up a little bit to some participants for Dr. Brazile.
Awesome, thank you. We have quite a few questions.
Yep. Hi, thanks, Dr. Brazile. We have a few questions in the chat. The first one comes from David Falk. Republican state legislatures are today enacting voter suppression measures. What steps can we take to fight these new laws?
Expose them. This is not the first time we've seen the Republicans following a major political season clamp down on opportunities for Americans to vote early. I mean, voting early should not be controversial. I mean, most Americans work one, if not two jobs to make ends meet. And giving people an opportunity to vote over a series of days or a couple of weekends before Election Day, it enables people to take time to make a plan to vote, as opposed to, oh my God, it's Tuesday and I got to vote, but I have to start working at 7 and I don't get home until 8, but the polls close at 6 or the polls close at 7. So that's number one. Number two, since the election of Barack Obama, these draconian vote ID laws. It's one thing to say that my ID, my driver's license is all I need. But if I'm of a certain age and I don't drive and I don't have $35 or $40 to get a renewal license or even my initial license, then allow me to use some other government form of ID. Why is it that students in Texas have to, their so-called student ID issued by the state is not good enough, but if they had a gun license issued by the state, that's good enough. So 34 states have now imposed some form of voter ID law. And one of my sisters said years ago, she said, how many IDs do I need to vote? She lived in Florida, but she still lives in Florida. She lives in a different county. And I said, one form of ID. She said, I had to produce 3 forms: a voter registration card, she had to produce her driver's license, and thankfully she had her utility bill just in order to cast her ballot. So we need to, every American must take responsibility to ensure that our democracy, and voting is the lifeblood of our democracy, that we do not curtail the rights of eligible citizens to vote. And secondly, as I talked about accessibility, which is very important. Why is it that the average wait time, and these are all studies, I don't have to, I'm not making this up, I've been around a long time. Why is it that in the average city or county or municipality where white voters live, in some cases they can vote within 1 hour or less, but in majority minority communities, it takes several hours to stand in line. Do you know one of the biggest expenses this year that we had to defer resources to was food trucks? And people kept saying, why do you need food trucks? Well, people are in line 2-3 hours. And during this pandemic, they couldn't get out and go back and get out. So we had to provide food trucks. And we didn't care. We didn't ask anybody to tell us if they're Democrat or Republican. We just said we got food. We got hot dogs, got hamburgers, got, salads, etc. The point I'm making is that voting should be accessible. Voting should be a national holiday. I also think that in some of the reforms that we're looking at, we need to talk about the Electoral College. I didn't feel the same way after the Gore campaign, but I now feel it after the Trump-Clinton campaign and now the Biden-Trump campaign. The Electoral College needs to be re-examined, and we need to directly elect our president. So these are, we have so many reforms. Michael Steele, the former lieutenant governor, of Maryland, and I are working on reforms in a bipartisan fashion so that we can present these reforms to our nation governors and election administrators, because we need to ensure no American is ever denied what a democracy is all about, to have the voice and representation of the people. So I would hope that we would monitor these states and we will call them out, and we will go to those hearings, whether they're virtual or in person, and testify about the experiences that we've seen on the ground, but also testify to encourage lawmakers and other regulators to ensure that no American is denied the right to vote. Voter fraud has been used countless times to restrict voter participation, not to expand it, to restrict. And based on my experience, no Americans, very few Americans, would like to go and sit in jail for years simply because they want to vote multiple times or have their dog or cat or somebody else vote. No, we need to ensure that no American is ever denied the right to vote. I feel very passionate about voting rights. After all, that's how I got my start in American politics, and that is what I'm going to continue to spend my life, like John Lewis, fighting for voting rights for every American, every eligible American citizen.
Just on that point, I assume you are in favor of the passage of H.R. 1 that contains so many of the restorations of what the Supreme Court dismantles as part of the Voting Rights Act. Any priorities in that bill that you think are especially important?
Modernize our system, strengthen our system. I support the renewal or the strengthening of the Voting Rights Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Again, all of these are important priorities. The Democrats passed it last year. It's sat on Mitch McConnell's desk. Voting should not be a partisan exercise. It is about our democracy. It's about, just because you register in one party or another party, that should not matter at all, because the majority of Americans, by the way, they're not Democrats and they're not Republicans. They are non-affiliated. They don't care, about either major political party. So we need to ensure that our democracy, we have, in the past, we've been the beacon of democracy. But after the attack that we witnessed a couple of weeks ago at the citadel of our democracy, our nation's capital, we need to take prudent steps to ensure that our democracy is preserved, and the guardrails of democracy are strengthened. So HR 1 is a good place to start, along with the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Because if we don't renew those sections, now why is it that after the Supreme Court weakened the Voting Rights Act in Shelby v. Holder, why is it that in all of these jurisdictions previously covered by the Voting Rights Act of 1965, why is it that many of these municipalities did not have voting locations? And many of these localities had to reach out to private sources just to get enough money to open up their quote unquote precincts, their voting locations. Because again, the Voting Rights Act, there used to be a pre-clearance where in the state of Alabama, you would have to go and say, okay, here are all the counties and here are all of the sites. And especially in those majority minority counties in the Black Belt and other places, they would have to show that they would have 6 precincts, evenly divided between Black neighborhoods and white neighborhoods, because the South is still segregated just like parts of the North. And after that provision was weakened in 2013, many of these jurisdictions have dismantled all of the legal protections that we once relied upon to ensure no American was denied the right to vote, or putting voting locations on the outskirts of town. And I grew up in a household, my parents did not have any car. They worked. They called the bus. I called the bus. They did not have a car. The only time we got in a car is when one of my uncles, aunts would come and get us to bring us downtown for Mardi Gras and some other events. So it's important that we understand that not every community across this country is capable of being able to provide the type of voting facilities for all of their residents. And the priority often going to the majority white communities. And if you don't believe me, go on the Brennan Center for Justice website, the ACLU, the Legal Defense Fund, NAACP Legal Defense Fund, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under the Law of Democracy docket. There's so many resources out there. Everyone who is listening to us on Black Friday should make a pledge here in 2021 to be a drum major for justice and equality for all.
Cody, go ahead.
Sure. We have another question from Miriam Osborne Elliott. Given the heightened visible impact of HBCU graduates on the current political landscape, what advice would you offer to students, staff, faculty, and administration to strengthen their positions in society to impact policies affecting people of color in the nation?
I think that's a brilliant question. And, you know, as a proud graduate of Louisiana State University, the flagship university in the state of Louisiana, I long ago believed that Southern University, Grambling University, and other Dillard and Xavier and other colleges in my home state should be given the similar resources as my alma mater, LSU. I fought for that as a student. Here I was, a Black student at LSU fighting for Black students at HBCUs. Why? Because I recognized the quality of our education had to be the same if we were going to meet the challenges, not just of our century, but of our times. And HBCUs should not be struggling on fighting for resources simply because they're not getting the kind of money and endowments that major institutions receive. And so it's important. I'm now working on the campus of Howard University to try to find more ways that we can have public-private partnership, develop programs that are unique to Black colleges and institutions and Black communities so that we can study income inequality, so that we can figure out ways that we can remove all of the health disparities between Blacks and whites. There are important priorities that I think can be met at Black colleges and universities across the country, but they need the resources and they need the type of endowments that we see other major institutions have. You know, I've been lucky enough, in addition to lecturing at over 200 colleges and universities here in the United States and abroad, but I've been lucky to go up to Harvard on 2 occasions of my life. And the one thing that I've always been impressed when I'm up at the Kennedy School is just the resources that are available to me to do not just the work that I often, I go up to Harvard, I should tell you why. After losing by 537 votes, I went to the Institute of Politics, and that's when I wrote my book, Cooking with Grease. And on my last visit up to Harvard, I had an opportunity to write about cybersecurity and wrote my last book, Hacks. So, but the resources are just vast. And one of the things that I'm working with now is trying to help HBCUs across the country to receive those kind of endowments and work, not just from graduates. I'm not a graduate. My parents went to HBCUs, but I and my uncles and aunts, I mean, I have a family of HBCU graduates and my current niece who just graduated from Southern University Law School. But we need to find resources so that these schools can thrive and build the kind of community that we envision when many of these individuals, when many of the individuals started and created these schools centuries ago. So I'm just excited. I know that the times are changing. I know sometimes you can't see when the wheels of history are turning, but the wheels are turning. And we just got to be in the driver's seat to make sure it turns in the right direction and that we don't put it back in reverse and go back, because what we should be doing as a nation and as a society is going forward. And we cannot go forward without the leadership of HBCUs and those graduates.
Okay, thank you for that. This is from Vice Mayor, Town of Indian Head, Ron Zatola. It says, hi, Donna.
Hello, I know Indian Head. I know where it's at.
It says, thank you for your time. As an immigrant from South Asia, events of 2020 have opened our eyes and mind, and most of us clearly now understand that even though we could be in lockstep with the African-American community for most of your history of struggle, we now know that we have shared identity with the African-American community. How can we continue to be engaged with the Black community so that we get to know each other as well and join alongside Black Americans to be engaged?
That's a great question. And let me just say this. I was honored to be a part of Reverend Jackson's first historic campaign in 1984. It was a campaign that reached out to every community, to every ethnic individual, every leader. And the campaign was probably one of the most inclusive campaigns in US history. I mean, long before we began to understand the importance of LGBTQ rights, Jesse Jackson was preaching it, and he was willing to fight for it. Long before Hispanic Americans and Asian Americans and other Americans, especially young Americans, had a seat at the table, was Reverend Jackson, who was pushing it, who was fighting for it. And so I just want to say that we have to work together. We got to build coalitions that looks like the country itself. This is not about a competition for who can be the best token at the table, because tokenism is just window dressing. Blacks have always believed in inclusion for all Americans. Diversity, equity, and inclusion are goals. They should be values that we all preserve and that we all work toward. I often tell people, again, what I say about being a woman. I have never asked a man to leave a room when I walked in. In fact, I say, should I move over? Because I'm bringing my seat to the table. I'm not asking nobody to leave. I want to learn from you. I want to help lead with you. I want to help make the difference. And so I think working together, leading, bringing people together, community, entrepreneurship, ensure that resources are made available to everyone, not just to the small group of people that we've always given money to and resources and highlighted their victories. It needs to be targeted investments in our communities. People often say to me, well, how come Black folks are still falling behind? We've done all of this. I said, you ain't done nothing. I said, what you've done is throw $3 at a problem. You can't throw nothing. You got to include us in how those $3 are being spent. I'm just using 3 as a metaphor, but let me just say this. We have to invest, and we need targeted investment, especially now, because this pandemic has exposed everything. It has exposed the digital divide. It has exposed, income inequality. Why is it that Black banks were the last to be targeted to get resources to provide small business loans? I mean, we had to raise holy hell just to get Black banks. And I said, I was on the mayor's task force, I said, where else do Black businesses go to get money when they need the money, when they want to open up a business? Where do you get money when you want to start up? You go to the places that are in your community. You can't go to those big banks. Those big banks give money to the big people. They don't give it to the small men and women owned banks, owned businesses. So as a leader in the community, as a leader in our society, it's important that you take the lead to work not just with the Black community, but communities all across the spectrum. And you work for those targeted investments. I guarantee you, you will see a return on your investment when you are able to include more people at the table and you become one of those leaders that we wish to see in the future of our society. And thank you for your great questions, by the way.
This question is from Dr. Betty Valencia in Orange, California. She says, I'm tired of our community being labeled as the sleeping giant. The Latino community, along with other disenfranchised groups, continue to suffer the impacts of public policy, which continues to segregate us politically. My question is twofold. One, how do we encourage those in politics and media to reframe the framing of Latino communities from passive to active members of the political process, but lack access and integration? Two, what can we do to bring in other communities of color to build sustaining coalitions to become active in local and national politics to change policy when our own Democratic Party keeps sidestepping our most pressing issues of police violence, housing, immigration, and representation? Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you for that great question. And I love Orange County. You all have done such an amazing job in empowering others. And as you know, there's been a sea change in that county over the last 2 decades. It was once a hub of conservatism. And now, because of the strong growth in the Hispanic community, you see more and more people who are emerging as leaders from Orange County in the state of California. So I'll start by saying visibility is viability. Visibility is viability. We have more power than we even know how to use, and we don't leverage our power. We're the only people that come, and when I say we the only people, I'm talking about minorities in general, because we're really not minorities. We're majorities if we ever figured out our political power. I remember back in the 1980s when I kept saying we could have over 40 members of the Congressional and Congressional Black Caucus and the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and people used to look at me and say, what are you drinking? I'm like, no, I'm not drinking Kool-Aid. I drink a little bit stronger stuff. But I understood political power. You got to understand political power and how to leverage it. Visibility is viability. And we need to strengthen those who are already at the table. The fact that you have not only statewide officials, you now have a United States Senator who is Hispanic. He has taken the seat of Kamala Harris. He was appointed to that seat. So utilize that power. Utilize the fact that we have more people in positions of power today, not just in Congress, not just in statewide office, but also in the Biden-Harris administration once they all get confirmed. So utilize this power and don't be afraid to speak up. I mean, what are you afraid of? Separating children at the border? You afraid to tell them that that's wrong and morally wrong? Are you afraid to stand up, as I've stood up time and time again, even on Fox News, for a pathway to citizenship? Are you afraid to stand up for jobs, for fair housing, equitable housing, loans? I mean, we all have to use whatever talent that God has given us and the opportunities so that we can make sure that those who've been on the outskirts of hope can now find a path into the circle of opportunity. But we cannot be there. We cannot get there simply by saying, oh, I just voted last week. I'm done. Oh, you voted last week? Well, guess what? You just hired somebody to be your voice on Capitol Hill or in the State House in Sacramento, then you follow up. Later today, I'm going to participate in the inauguration ceremony for Shirley Weber, who will be the Secretary of State. Now, she just replaced Alex Padilla, who I mentioned replaced Kamala Harris. Now, I have already been in touch with Alex. I'm not even a resident in California, but this is how I use my political power. Hey, Alice, congratulations. You coming to DC, boo? I'm here. You need something? Call me. You know, I make good gumbo, but more importantly, I'm going to look out for my folks in California. And yes, I'm going to look out for my people in California with Shirley Weber, the Secretary of State. She's going to be in charge of the voting process, working with Governor Gavin Newsom and many others. So my point is that you gotta utilize your power. You got to increase your power. You got to hold those elected officials accountable. When I was a chief of staff on Capitol Hill, a staff director, and all the other positions I held, you know who I worked for? I didn't work for just Eleanor Holmes Norton or Dick Gephardt or the Congress of the United States House of Representatives. I worked for the people of the District of Columbia and the people of the United States. I recognize when I took my oath, I was taking it to you. They take an oath to serve, not to be served, to serve. Hold them accountable. And guess what? Get ready to run yourself. Now, I was 19 years old as a student at LSU, and I was appointed to the Fair Housing Commission because I raised all kind of hell. You didn't think I made it all the way to 60 by keeping my mouth shut. I was raising hell as early as I possibly could. My mother didn't have to give me a pacifier. I was ready to talk. And I raised hell. I say, students, we're paying more money to live off campus. Okay, we need to pay the same amount as people in the neighborhood. You're charging us more. I raised hell. I raised so much hell, the mayor, Pat Screen, put me on the Fair Housing Commission. In the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, I raised so much hell about people not being able to go home that the governor appointed me to serve on the Louisiana Recovery Board. And I raised so much hell with Barack Obama, who asked me one day, Donna, what did you want? And I said, no man has ever asked me that question. So I said, oh, I want to be on the Fulbright board. So raise hell, get appointed to positions, run for office, hold town hall meetings. I guarantee you the politicians will show up. I mean, use your social media account to say, I need answers. We need answers. And yes, the Democratic Party should be able to respond to you, but also the Republican Party. Everybody should respond to you because it's we the people, not we the politicians. So that's my answer. I'm sorry I can't give you a short one, but the short, sweet answer is you're the leader we've been waiting for. So go ahead and lead, because that's the biggest problem in American politics today. We need more people to lead. Thank you for your great question.
This last question, and we're going to open up the mic after this to anyone who wants to speak, but this question comes from Michael Bodikin. It says, while Black voters voted overwhelmingly for Biden and Harris, as you know, Black men were twice as likely as Black women to vote for Trump. How do we better persuade Black men that the Democratic Party is more aligned with their interests?
Well, first of all, I spoke to many of my friends and colleagues in the run-up to the 2020 election about the need to ensure that Black men, like Black women, are able to get their needs met. Now, I have no problems with Republicans reaching out to Democrats and Democrats reaching out to Republicans, because let me just be very blunt. I mean, politics is about participation. And I want somebody to come after me. Come for me, baby. Come for me, baby. Come for me, baby. Come for me, baby. And I believe the same thing should be true of Black men. We should never take not one vote in this country for granted. Not a Black woman, not a Hispanic woman, not a Black man or a Hispanic man. And if you look at the Hispanic vote, just like the Black male vote, some of the Hispanic men, they had a propensity to support Donald Trump too. I ain't hating. I didn't hate in 2016, and I'm not going to hate in 2020. If you saw something in Donald Trump that you did not see in Joe Biden, let me know so I can figure out how I can help make that happen. Because after all, this is about empowerment. This is about having your voice in the room. And so I think it's important that Joe Biden and Kamala. Hello there, I'm back. I'm here.
There you go.
I don't know how that happened. That was stranger than fiction. I was just getting ready to do my Catholic girl preaching. I ain't going nowhere. I don't feel no ways tired.
Right.
I've come too far. We've come too far.
Amen.
And you know, I just want to say, I know we have some more questions. I just want to say this on a personal note. I went out there as a kid. I had no expectations of what my work would ever accomplish. But I'm living proof that you can start with nothing and have faith not just in a God, but have faith in the journey and the people who have led us. And throughout my youth, I kept thinking about how young those brave men and women, how young they were. The ones who were marching, the ones who wanted voting rights, the ones who wanted us to be able to sit at the counter, the ones who wanted us to be able to sit in any seat on the bus. How young. They were young. So this is your turn. This is your opportunity. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. I left Louisiana 2 weeks after graduating from college. Mrs. King, Coretta Scott King, gave me a chance. She said, "Can you help?" I said, "Absolutely. I mean, what else am I going to do, right? I'm 21. And 2 years later, we were able to get enough signatures and enough petitions to make Dr. King's birthday a holiday. And look at me. I got involved in the Jesse Jackson campaign a year later. After that, in 1984, we were registering voters all over this country. And then think about it. 20 years later, we had Barack Obama as president of the United States. And think about Shirley Chisholm allowing me as a young kid, 25, yay. And Mrs. Chisholm said, "Donna, come work with me." And look, today we have Kamala Harris as vice president. All I'm asking you young people to do is to believe in yourselves, believe in your dreams, believe that you can make a difference. I believe in you. That is why I love teaching. This is the moment. And why you? Because there's no one better. And why now? Because tomorrow is not soon enough. I know tomorrow is going to be even better than yesterday because you are going to help stir the pots. Thank you.
Professor Mussington?
Just reveling in Donna's remarks and reflecting on my own immigrant career. And I think often immigrants and those who benefit from the striving of others appreciate it more. I mean, I know I do personally. I came from Canada and the United Kingdom, two disparate but not onerous places. But the appeal of the US model was always sort of what drove me. And I remember as a kid seeing Dr. King and others, people who Donna worked for, driving forward, unabashed, unwilling to accept anything but what they were after. And that's a huge motivator for me in my career and hopefully for students here too. So I want to thank Dr. Brazile for her contributions and other people's. Which brings me to sort of a point about where we are in American politics today, I suppose, in terms of the ambitions that this administration has and the ambitions that we all have who see the possibility of, a more perfect union that we always hear and talk about and wish for. I take it from your remarks that you're generally optimistic that we did prevail. And by we, I mean those who were part of the Democratic coalition. I was a proud member of that, both electorally and otherwise. What do you see as the principal challenges to us driving forward more?
Well, there's so many challenges that face this young administration. Of course, the intense hyper-partisanship. I mean, we're fighting from within. Our greatest enemy today may be ourselves. And I don't think I would ever have said that before. As I sit here, there's another helicopter. Once upon a time, when we heard the helicopters, we thought, well, somebody just robbed the liquor store and they're trying to track that person down. No. Since the events of this past 2 weeks, when we hear the helicopter, those of us who live in DC, and I'm sure those of you on the outskirts of DC, we're worried that what's happening. There was a time when I would go outside and walk my dog and just looked at the neighbors and looked at the cars and didn't think twice. Now, when I walk my dog, I look at the neighbors, they're all shut in. And of course, I look at license plates, where they're from, why they're here. So I think the greatest challenge is hyperpartisanship and all of that anger and fury that has been unleashed against our political leaders. No one should be threatened simply because they disagree with their fellow citizen. I disagree with my family members over how to make gumbo. I love my sister. I have a sister who put turkey necks in her gumbo. I love it. I put andouille sausage. They love it. But we don't fight over gumbo. We just say, hey, you make it better than me and I make it better than you. In America today, they says, well, I want $3 to take care of this problem. And you say, well, I've already given you $3. We don't have this problem doesn't exist. We need to figure out how to come back to the table and find common sense solutions. And I think the art of compromise can be revitalized if the leaders that we elect are pressured from the citizens to go into the room and talk. Maybe we can't get $3, but I'll take $1.50. I'll take 75 cents at this point. Why? Because the need is great. And people are hungry. People are struggling. This virus has done an untold amount of damage on our society. So the intense partisanship is one, the COVID-19, the fact that we have not had adequate testing and tracing, and we're still behind on vaccination and the rollout of the vaccines. We also lack optimism about our future. There's so many Americans who have just turned against themselves and against their country because they don't believe that the American dream is possible. We need to figure out ways to reinstill the kind of hope that will give people some ability to believe that the best days are still ahead. There's also what I call profound generational changes and shift, and technology is rapidly changing the way we do business. And we need to make sure that every American is up to speed so that we don't have all of these generational and other type of divides. And finally, this national dialogue that we are going to have, the national dialogue on racial equity, starting with criminal justice reform, starting with income inequality. We got to make sure that we can all utilize the same language. By providing me with resources doesn't mean that we're excluding anyone. By providing me with opportunity doesn't mean that others won't be able to get the opportunity. By giving me opportunities, that's a sign in my judgment that everyone has now finally got into the room. As I said, the outskirts of hope. We got to find ways to bring people back into the circle of opportunity. And so many, because of systemic racism, the structures of racism in this society are, I mean, it's well constructed, and it's been constructed for hundreds of years, 4 centuries. And so we have to break these structures down so that when corporations receive a tax break, a tax credit, that is hailed as jobs. But they're using, in some cases, taxpayers' money to build stadiums or bring arenas downtown. But yet when we want jobs or job training or affordable housing, all of a sudden we cry broke. What is wrong with that? So we got a lot of work to do, but I think we have to educate, we have to inspire, and then we got to go out there and continue to organize. And I want to do all three. I did it while President Trump was in office, and I'm going to do it while President Biden is in office. I'm going to organize. I'm going to inspire the next generation to serve. And I am going to go out there and make sure people understand what's at stake so they know that this is not a giveaway or giving somebody an unfair advantage. This is about making sure that there's equality and justice for all. That's all. That's it.
On that uplifting note, I have to say the following. When I saw Speaker Pelosi speak a few days ago about the enemy within in the Congress, I was afraid. I never thought I would hear a speaker utter. And I listened to some of the people who are self-described enemies within, and they seem committed to breaking down the potential for multiracial coalition building, or even a simple restatement of fairly traditional American unity messaging. I mean, I have to say, I'm hopeful, because I think as an American, we have to be hopeful. but it seems like there's a level of partisanship, as you've said, that is really without precedent, at least sort of in my career, and I'm 60 years old, so 60. Have you seen partisanship like this before? And do you see a sort of a way out of the current sort of gridlock that we seem to be falling into?
This is my theory, and I don't have a lot of evidence and research yet, but I think it's one of the things I probably will work on in the coming months. But over the last, I would say, 2 decades, let's go all the way back to, some people might want to go back to Ronald Reagan, some people might want to go back to the Clinton administration, whichever. If you want to start with Reagan, fine. If you want to start with Clinton. But at some point between the 1980 election and the 1992 election, we lost it. First of all, the first thing you should look at is the number of moderates. The number of moderates in both political parties went from almost 3/4 of the, say, Congress to less than 10% on each side. So we lost moderates. And if you don't have moderation, then you're left with the extreme. Number two, and again, cable television. Cable television became an instrument where people got on and they would give 24/7. You got to fill the hours. I mean, we just couldn't have straight news and weather and sports for 24/7. I mean, cable TV became part of entertainment. And what did you want when you were entertained? You wanted people who can just throw things at each other, throw it, and see what stick, right? And then here come the internet. And by the way, in full disclosure, there's this rumor that Al Gore invented the internet, and I always said, no, he inspired it, because if he invented it, he would have taught me first, and I knew nothing about the internet. But you had all of these confluences. And yes, there's an element of race in this whole episode, because race has been a subtext or sub-theme of our politics from the beginning. Just go back and read the Federalist Papers, go back and look at all of the constitutional issues that they had to resolve, and how race has always been a part of it. Not to say that gender was ever, recognized, but race. So with the confluence of mass cable television, with this normalizing of extremes in our political discourse, and I think technology and the way these social platforms, the partisanship has gotten deeper and deeper. When I was a Hill staffer, I was encouraged to find common ground with my Republican colleagues. And most of my Republican friends to this day, and I got lots of them, I met them when I was a Hill staffer, because we were encouraged to reach out. We were encouraged to go and find common ground. Nowadays, if you have the votes, you wield power. You don't reach out. You don't listen to the other side. You don't say, well, what if? No, you just say, what the hell? So I think we have to find ways now. And it's not just politicians. It's academia, it's in sports, it's in business, it's all of our institutions and our churches. We all have to work together, because a large segment of our country has been radicalized. And when you spend close to $5 to $7 billion on negative advertisement, and it's not just saying that John Doe or Jane Doe is crap. It's saying that John Doe and his party, or Jane Doe and her backers. I mean, so we're not even giving people the benefit of the doubt. If I call myself a conservative Republican, you say I'm a racist. If I call myself a liberal Democrat, you say I'm a socialist. I mean, we're out there throwing names, we're demeaning each other without even knowing anything about each other. As I tell people, I sometimes disagree with myself. I don't make my gumbo the same way as my sisters. I believe in lanyard, which is a little bit of something extra, that we all bring a little bit of something extra to the table, and we should be able to appreciate our differences without tearing each other apart. There's nothing about Donald Trump that 4 years of relentless attack on me personally. Yes, me personally. The president used to tweet at me. I'm like, dude, you must have some better things to do with your tweets, right? He would tweet at me, and I said, honey, if you ever tasted my gumbo, even my etouffees, I'll even make you jambalaya, go straight down 16th Street and bring you a big hearty bowl. He never wanted my gumbo, which was a mistake, because I never got a chance to warm his heart. The point I'm making is that when George W. Bush was president, I had an opportunity to go warm his heart. George Bush and I would sit there and talk and talk and talk and talk until somebody went in and said, well, that's it. And when I saw him last week at the Capitol, he grabbed me. He grabbed me in this COVID moment. I had on my mask. He grabbed me. He said, Carol, how you doing? I said, baby, I'm all right, sugar. How you doing? And his wife was there. And I said, yeah, honey, I'm good. We became friends. You know why? Because there was a hurricane. And I didn't like the way he was responding to the hurricane. So I wrote a column in the Washington Post. Mr. President, can I help you? Yeah, I'll help you. I work out, I'll help you. And he took me up on my offer. He took me up on my offer. And I went over to that White House for 3 years. And I said, I would go there very humble. I said, Mr. President, you know, we got to rebuild the levees. Mr. President, we got to open up the schools. Mr. President, our roads, our colleges, and yes, I fought for Black colleges as well as the others. And Mr. President, people need to get back in their homes. I would just go there and beg and tell them the story of the people of the Gulf Coast, including my family in Louisiana. And before he left the White House, you would love this. I went over because by then, President Bush and I had become good friends. I said, Mr. President, I just talked to my dad, and he said, how's your daddy doing? I said, he's doing good, but he said, the VA hospital is crappy. We need a new VA hospital. One of his last budget items was to build back a very suitable and excellent VA hospital center in New Orleans. The president listened, and my dad was proud of me for going over to talk to the president about the needs of veterans. So I tell you this because I know we can work together. I worked with George W. Bush. And had you told me that in 1999 and 2000, I would have said, you are crazy. I would never do anything. And that storm showed up and I said, how can I help you? I tried to help the president, not just during the COVID crisis, but when Hurricane Maria. I know all about hurricanes. I lived through all of them. I grew up in Hurricane Alley. He didn't care. I couldn't get through. But I tell you one thing, he really missed my gumbo because I make the best. He could have had some good gumbo and I would have brought it to him just like this. You want some gumbo, baby? This will make you feel better. I would have helped him, but he didn't reach out. I hope Biden continues to reach out to Republicans. I know it's hard to find friends, but we have to find friends. We're not all enemies. We're Americans, and we should be able to get together.
I take that as a very, very positive message. I assume you would agree, however, that accountability for some people who are not friends is probably going to be a part of resetting the conversation we have politically so that bipartisanship is possible.
Oh, absolutely. Look, you know, when you're a political commentator, you don't have time to go out there and take a poll or put your finger against the wind. And I have to tell you, as a district resident, I'm still appalled at what happened on January 6th. Our lives were on the line. The fact that Maryland state troopers and Virginia state troopers had to come and help us because the president of the United States through the Pentagon would not allow us to release the National Guard. Yes, they should be held accountable. I want everybody to be held accountable. If you know of someone who participated in the insurrection against our government, turn them in, call the FBI, report them. They should all be held accountable. I don't believe the president should get off simply because he's no longer in office. I believe he should be held accountable because he was responsible for bringing that mob into our city with the intent on disrupting the process. And yes, my friends, my former colleagues, and my congresswoman, and everyone else, their lives were at stake. And their lives are still at stake because this is not over, sadly. And I pray for my country, I pray for my city, and I pray for I pray for the Congress. I mean, they're my neighbors. I mean, I agree with you. Accountability. Absolutely, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Brazile. Aisha, any other questions? Over to you.
Tony, Aisha?
Hi, Dr. Brazile. At this time, we are going to open up the floor to any questions. Please be sure to keep your questions brief, raise your hand, and I will bring you up to ask your question. Thank you, Ms. Brazile.
Dr. Brazile, I'm gonna read off one. It says, I know personally I am ignorant to a lot of issues plaguing the Black community. At this time, it feels like there is so much that I don't even know where to start, especially since things seem more hidden nowadays. I guess my question is, how did you know where to start?
Well, my own background. I grew up, I'm the third of 9 children. My parents were, they both worked multiple jobs to make ends meet. And I grew up wanting to make a difference. I wanted to not only help my family, my community, but I also knew that I wanted to serve in some capacity. So I think the most immediate thing is figure out where you can serve. Start where you are. Start where you are. And for me, starting in my local community, working on campaigns, working in nonprofits. I'll never forget, by the age of 16, I was running a summer youth camp program. I was an athlete. Back then, I thought I had a good body, right? I did have a good body because look, I tell people, Professor, my body got me into college because I had a partial scholarship. My brains got me out, but I did have a good body. So, but I knew that I was talented in that way, and I wanted to have a summer camp program for kids who wanted to do more learning. And of course, those who wanted to go to basketball camp, baseball camp, volleyball camp, I played everything. And so find out what is your passion. I knew I had a passion for service. I knew I had a passion for teaching. I knew I had a passion for reaching out and working with people. And so if you know your passion and you know the gifts that God has given you, because God has given us all a few gifts. Some people have better gifts than others. I think of course, LeBron James, but use your passion, use your gifts. I mean, if you walk into my house right now, in addition to seeing all my lovely flowers and everything else in my artwork, you will know that in every room in my house, every room, I have books. I had a passion for reading. I couldn't read enough. I thought my grandmother knew Abraham Lincoln. When she told me she didn't know him, but she knew Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, I said, you did? Well, she was just saying, go read and see what you know. I mean, so find that passion, find that willingness to serve and make time to do it. Here I am, I consider myself now to be a gardener. I'm into gardening, I'm into DIY projects. I'm creating all kinds of things with chalk paint. I'm constantly challenging myself to do more, to give back more. And yes, every month I go in my pantry and I find items that, you know what, last month I was really into this. Or, I bought 6 boxes of Jiffy cornbread and I know doggone well I'm not gonna be able to eat all 6. And I give it to my local food bank. I go and I say, okay, I know I'm not gonna get down to that size 10 dress or that size 12 dress. And maybe I should give that also to the shelter. Find ways to give back, because the only way to pay it forward is if we start giving back now. Give back whatever you can, time, talent, resources, pantry, clothes. Make a difference in the lives of someone. When we were kids growing up and we were not rich by any stretch of the imagination, we didn't have the money, but what we did have was love. And people would show us love. And sometimes that came during the holidays. And the fact that people cared enough about my family, my mother, my father, to sometimes just, they would come home with a turkey, a ham, or some greens. And my mother would always, my dad was a good cook too, they would make as much as they possibly could. And then every kid in the neighborhood has something to take home to their family. Think about how we can make a difference. It doesn't matter how much money you have. Sometimes it's that extra box of cornbread that you can turn into muffins that you can give to somebody who just needs some muffins to eat. Sometimes it's that coat that you can't put on no more because you have grown out of it, but you can give it to someone that could keep them warm. There's every which way you can serve, but you got to have a heart, as Dr. King said. You have to have a heart of love. And if you love yourself, then I know you love humanity. And I do. and everybody can serve. As Dr. King said, everybody can be great because everybody can serve. That's how I knew I would spend my life dedicated to service, because I knew Dr. King was right. We can all serve. It's all about love.
Thank you, Ms. Brazile. I'm gonna call on a couple of people from the audience who have questions. First person would be Amanda. Amanda, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for organizing this discussion. It's been so interesting. Dr. Brazile, you've spoken very eloquently about this, but the heart of these voter suppression laws and frankly the heart of the attack on our Capitol that we witnessed a couple of weeks ago are really based on this myth of voter fraud, this idea that somehow machines aren't working or dead people are voting or whatever it is that gives fuel to this fire that our elections are not free and fair. And I just wonder if you have a message as to how to kind of counter those arguments when we talk with friends and family or folks who just are not, who question the validity of elections. Because I find those conversations, I find it hard to convince people, that they are. And I think, it would be helpful to kind of know how to approach that.
Thank you. I think that's a great question. First of all, start with the premise that there are multiple layers to our democracy, multiple layers. When you register to vote, it must be verified and confirmed, not just in the at the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, but also it goes to the state. It gets put in the system and it is confirmed. It is verified and it is matched. So that's number one. Our voter registration system, the only complaints I've heard about our voter registration systems over the last 20 years is that their technology has not caught up with the ability to, when you say a change address, when you go and you apply for a change of address to the USPS, well, often that information is not sent to the DMV so that it can be updated in the voter registration system. So that's just like figuring out how do we connect the dots. And I think over the last 5 years, you've seen states really update their technology. You now have certain states, I think it's 15 with automatic voter registration, which has a verification process. Number two, the vote machines, I prefer machines that have a paper ballot backup system because I think they are more reliable than the old machines, the old punch card. Remember the swinging chairs, the pregnant chair, my favorite, all those eye-popping chairs. Well, they've gotten better also. The technology has improved our voting experience. We still have to do more to ensure that no American is standing in line for 3, 4, or sometimes 6 hours in order to cast his or her ballot. We need to make sure that these machines and the technology are working on time, and so that there's no discontinuation of service when machines malfunction or break down or they get overheated, all of the old things that used to happen. So if you go back and look at the 60 or 75 lawsuits that were filed in the immediate aftermath of the election, there was no proof. Rudy Giuliani showed up in several states and he had no proof because then, you know what? Had they come in with proof, the judge would have to say, okay, well, based on this recommendation or based on all of this proof that in precinct 10 and Ward 8, there was allegations of fraud, we are going to stop the count and go back and recount that or re-verify. There was no proof. Nobody submitted any proof. So we're basically dealing with a lie. So how do you combat a lie? This is a lie. There's no proof. There's no evidence. These are blank pages because there's no evidence of fraud. And so in combating this lie, you got to go out. You have to say it's simple that while our form of democracy is not the best, it operated in 2020 in the most professional and authentic manner. It really was one of the best run elections. Yes, were there problems? Yes. I mean, How many of you are getting your mail on time? I just got my American Express bill. You know, I didn't want to pay it anyway. But it just came. It was due on the 10th, and the day is the 29th. The fact is that the postal system fell down, but that didn't lead to fraud. It took us 2 weeks to count the votes because the votes came in late. So I think you can take some of the evidence of this election and how well it was done. Just go back and look at Mr. Chris Crabb, who was fired by Mr. Trump after saying it was the best election. Look at Mr. Barr, who said he found no allegations of voter suppression. Voter fraud. Go back and quote those individuals, the Republican individuals, because don't take it from me, us Democrats, take it from the Republicans. They found no evidence. The Stop the Steal campaign is a conspiracy, a group of Americans who believe in the lie, not the truth. And the lie was told by the president himself. And the fact that the vice president said to the president, the former vice president to the former president, that the election will go forward, meaning the count will go forward. And what happened? The rioters came up to Capitol and say, hang Mike Pence. So let's focus on the truth that there was no evidence, there's no evidence of fraud. Because had they brought any evidence to the many jurisdictions where they challenged the results, things would have stopped. We would have went and dealt with the allegations and they would have been resolved. There was no evidence. It was a lie.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take a couple more questions.
Thank you, Dr. Brazile. We've got one more question for you from the audience from Cynthia Miller. So I'm going to bring them up to ask their question. Cynthia, please go ahead.
Hi, Ms. Miller.
Hi, I'm a commissioner of the city of District Heights. Dr. Brazile, I ran into you after Katrina at the Lowe's in Largo, Maryland. And it was such a treat to meet you. And you were very approachable, even though you were focused on what you were going to purchase. And I really appreciate that. My question is, when it comes to municipalities, our local elections are sometimes governed by what we put in the budget for voting machines and trying to get the word out. What is your advice on municipalities to better focus on getting the word out about the importance of local level elections? Because that seems to be, to me, a problem when residents are not educated on, when it comes to police reform, how your charter and your local elections play a big part in that. Thank you.
Well, I think those officials who are currently in office can help by ensuring that all of the proceedings, all of the meetings are held in such a manner that you can open it up to the public. I mean, look, the fact that we're able to communicate, I know everybody don't have all of these bells and whistles and internet and all this other stuff, but we have to constantly go to the people. We've got to constantly educate people. There are things that you could do with government officials can do to keep people informed, to utilize the local media, to educate people, to let them know when meetings are coming up, to hold hearings, town hall sessions. But remember, civil society, what we call non-governmental organizations, whether it's the League of Women Voters or whatever may exist in your community, they also can play a huge role. You know, I still belong to all of the old school organizations. I'm still a lifelong member of the NAACP. I'm a lifelong member of the League of Women Voters because I want to know as much as I possibly can so I can help as many as I possibly can. My church sends me bulletins. Everybody sends me bulletins because I want to be in the know. I want to be able to utilize the resources I have to educate others. So I think, Ms. Miller, what you can do is be that voice that says we need our organizations to know when these meetings occur so that we can provide testimony, expert witnesses, et cetera. Because the only way we're going to bring about the kind of change that we need to see in the 21st century if more people at the table and more voices are heard in the process. And by the way, you know, I know all about District Heights. Before we got a Lowe's in DC, I used to hang out over there. So we got a Lowe's now here, baby. But you know, for those of you in Maryland and Virginia, y'all know before we got the Home Depot and the Lowe's and all the other places we had to go, I would take my little happy stuff on the weekends and yes, and yes, and yes. I like to, I'm a DIY girl. I'm always trying to do some home improvement. And by the way, this little get up I have in my room right now, this is all my home improvements.
Looks nice.
Thank you. This pandemic is turning me into being something. I have never bought more nails and hammers and glue and tools. I mean, I like to glue it before I hammer it because I figured, you know, I can always take the portion and boot because if I hammer it, I'll mess it up. So I just glue it down. If it's look good, if it's square, and then I put my little leveler and then I get it together. And then I use my chalk paint and then I get me a little scrub. And then I put my polyurethane. It looks good. It look like I didn't went somebody. I bought all of this. No, I'm having fun. And sometimes it's only $10 a weekend to go to Home Depot or Lowe's, and I'm happy. I'm really happy. This is what this pandemic has brought me to. I had to stop cooking because I was cooking for all my old friends and bringing them food. Then they said, "But Donna, what about our calories?" I said, "Okay, well, good. Y'all go to McDonald's and I won't cook and deliver." I was knocking and delivering food free. I was DoorDash before DoorDash. And they were like, "We were worried." I said, "Well, okay, I won't bring you rice. I'll just bring you the gumbo." That's okay. Now I'm into DIY.
Great.
Do it yourself.
Yes.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, boo. God bless you. I hope to come out to District Heights again. Don't worry, you got some other things I like to do in District. I know all about Maryland, and I love myself some PG County. I love Montgomery County, all my neighbors, and every now and then I go up to Anne Arundel's because I have to get my shrimp and my crabs because you know you cannot make gumbo without shrimp and crabs. And I ain't driving home to Louisiana to get 5 pounds of shrimp. Okay, I have to just go straight on up the road. I know about those interstates. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
God bless you all. Aisha, Tony, Professor, how we doing on time?
Yes, ma'am. Well, we're a little over, but I think we had one last question from one of our students, one of our grad students in the public policy, and we're gonna let her in with that, and then we're gonna close out.
Okay, boo.
Thank you, Aisha. Thank you, Dr. Brazile, once again. I really appreciate your time, your insights. I do have one question, just kind of to wrap up this session. Something that I've noticed is just, you know, with our new administration being faced with some of the more obvious issues, you know, foreign policy, COVID, we can't ignore some of the internal issues, especially when it comes to the Black community. Yes, we, you know, heavily voted for the Biden-Harris administration, but we can't ignore the fact that a lot of Black people still feel sort of ostracized because they have lost faith in the government to deliver to them and the communities. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on what is kind of the way forward for this administration to ensure that not only does it restore the faith of specifically the Black community and the promises of the Democratic Party, but how does it also continue to expand and maintain a strong a stronghold in the Black community and Black voters? Thank you.
Well, first of all, I love the question because I do believe that this administration came into office understanding that the country was facing multiple crises. And as I mentioned, the coronavirus and this awful virus that has taken the lives of more than 430 of our fellow Americans and impacted millions more through loss of jobs, income, et cetera. They also believe that the economy we know that once we get the virus under control, we'll be able to get the economy back. But throughout this pandemic, millions of our citizens have lost their job. A disproportionate number of Black and Hispanic workers are now out of the workforce. And we got to make sure that there's a lifeline to bring them back in. And number 3, of course, climate change. And you saw just the other day, the president outlined immediate steps that we can take to not just preserve and keep our planet safe, but also the new jobs of the 21st century will be green jobs, and they also outline that. And the last but most important, I think, also, in addition to getting our schools reopened, the president and vice president outlined a racial equity plan. I think it's important to go online to whitehouse.gov, take a look at that racial equity plan. Susan Rice, a good friend of mine, the former UN ambassador, the former national security advisor to President Barack Obama, she is in charge of that initiative, and it's going to be a whole of government approach, not just focusing on housing, which is important, not just focusing on the Justice Department and criminal justice reform, but the whole of government, from small businesses to making sure that we reduce all of this, the health disparities. I mean, yesterday, the president announced that he would reopen the healthcare market, something that will benefit not just all Americans, but poor people and Black people, Hispanics, and others. So I think we need to support what the administration has outlined, but it's not just the administration and Democrats who are responsible for helping to improve the lives of all of our citizens. We have to put pressure on corporate America, because I mentioned earlier, they also benefit from our tax dollars. We have to put more pressure, of course, on all of our institutions in our democracy. So ensure that we deliver for the American people, not just Black Americans, not just white Americans and poor Americans or rich. We have to deliver for the American people. And we know as Democrats that is part of what we promised that we would do. And I say we because I went out there and promised. I said, look, I know Joe, I know Kamala, they're going to do it. I'm going to put pressure on them too. I've already put pressure on them. They know me. But we all have to put pressure. We have to put pressure on those who are in a position to help make this a better world and help improve the lives of all people. It's most importantly, those who've been marginalized and those who've been left behind in the past. And I am going to pledge today, as I pledged all my life, to being a troublemaker. Oh yeah, I'm gonna pledge, as John Lewis challenged us, to get in some good trouble, because I will hold Democrats responsible just like I will hold Republicans. I'm not gonna sleep one night without looking to see if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will keep their promises to us, the American people, but more importantly, for those who stood in long lines, those who braved the cold, those who had to go back twice because sometimes they said that signature didn't match. Everybody who turned out, they deserve to have the kind of government that is not just representative of their interests, but also that reflects their values and their priorities. So thanks for that question.
Thank you for answering, Dr. Brazile. I'm going to hand it over to Aisha to kind of wrap this up.
Dr. Brazile, we have former county executive Rashawn Baker, and he says you're great as always. So you got a lot of love in the chat. But we want to ask you one final thing. As a school, after we conclude each webinar, we'd like to give a charge. So can you give us a charge on how to get engaged and what we can do as a policy school? Well,
first of all, thank you so much for allowing me to participate on this important seminar. And I want to thank my dear friend, my professor now. I now know that I have a friend from Canada. And thank you, sir, for your leadership and all of the contributions that you're making to the students at the University of Maryland College Park. The charge today is a simple charge, and that is to not lose faith, to hold on to hope, to be the powerful example that our ancestors understood you would become. Sitting on the steps last week, I couldn't help but look at the dome and think back, perhaps to that moment when someone that looked like me, or looked like my father, or brothers, or uncles, who brought those stones one by one up that hill. Those stones become the cornerstones now of our lives in our time. And in addition to protecting our democracy, something that we fought for in this election cycle, because democracy was on the ballot. Now we have to strengthen our democracy. Make sure that the rails of democracy, which include the right to vote, the right to participate, we have to make sure that they're preserved. Joe Biden said in his inaugural address that our democracy was preserved, but no, it will not. It will not survive the onslaught that we have witnessed unless we all become more engaged. And by engagement, we will empower ourselves to make a difference. So I'll leave you with scripture because I'm a good old Catholic girl. And my grandmother, when we would gather at night, she would call us in the order of our birth. Cheryl, Sheila, Donna, Tati, Chet, Lisa, Demetra, Kevin, Ziola. I told you we were Catholic. And she would sit us down and she would pray. And we thought grandma knew the Lord. We kept thinking, where is Jesus? Because she was calling Jesus every 5 minutes. But she told us that that Bible was for warriors. And she would turn and find a good page. And she would often lead us with this one from the book of Galatians, chapter 6, verse 9. Do not grow weary in doing good, for in due season you'll reap a harvest if you don't give up. We have reaped so many wonderful harvests because of the men and women who dared to make a difference, the men and women who dared to put their lives on the line, who risk it all just for us to get the seat at the table. Now that that door is finally going to be open, prepare yourselves to serve. So my charge, my challenge to all of you is to get ready to serve. I want to thank you. Thank the University of Maryland, College Park, my friends and colleagues on campus and all throughout this region and the country. And most importantly, I want to thank God for being able to be here at such a time as this. So thank you all. And I hope we can stay in touch so that one day I can come back to campus after this pandemic and we can, as they say in my family, chew the fat.
Thank you. We appreciate you.
Thank you, my friends. God bless you all. Take good care of yourselves. And I'm not going to tell you who to root for in the Super Bowl because my beloved Saints lost. So have fun watching the game next weekend, okay?
Thank
Bless
you.
you all. I know how y'all feel about the Ravens too, but guess what? We'll all get to fight another moment. So God bless you all. Thank you so much. Have a great evening and a great weekend. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.